All right, let's dive into one of history's biggest, most fascinating contradictions, the Mongol Empire. How could a group famous for being world destroyers also be, well, world connectors? It's a wild story, so let's get into it. And that really is the heart of the matter, isn't it? How do you square these two things? How can the very same empire that was responsible for just unparalleled slaughter also create an era of unprecedented peace and trade? It's a puzzle that historians have been wrestling with for ages.
And, this isn't just us looking back and seeing two sides. Even back in the 13th century, people had these completely opposite views. I mean, if you were in the path of the Mongol army, they were an absolute terror, a force of nature. But if you were living within the empire they built, they brought a kind of stability that was so profound, it later got its own name, the Mongolian peace. So, to really figure this out, we're going to trace their story right from the beginning. We'll start in the tough, rugged environment that forged them, then we'll follow their insane, explosive expansion across the globe, and finally, we'll try to weigh the incredible and often contradictory legacy that they left behind for all of us.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Section 1, Forged in the Steppes. You really can't understand the Mongols without understanding where they came from. So, picture this, a collection of nomadic clans living just north of the Gobi Desert. Life here was anything but easy. We're talking a harsh, dry landscape where you survived by hunting, foraging, and herding your goats and sheep. This place, it didn't just shape them, it forged them. It created a culture where pretty much everyone had to be a skilled warrior and an expert on horseback, literally just to make it.
And out of this world steps one guy, Temujin. Through sheer military genius and making some really smart alliances, he starts to pull all these scattered Mongol tribes together. Then, in 1206, at a huge assembly of all the chiefs, a Kurultai, he's elected the leader of all the Mongols. He takes the title Genghis Khan, which means ruler of all. And from that moment on, things just explode. The conquests begin at a speed that's just staggering. By the time he dies in 1227, his empire stretches all the way from China to Persia.
So how on earth did they do it? How did a group of nomads from the steppes create the largest single-land empire in the history of the world? Well, the answer is in their totally revolutionary way of thinking about both war and ruling.
The Mongol playbook for conquest was systematic and, frankly, terrifying. First, they'd send messengers ahead with a very simple offer. Surrender peacefully or we will destroy you completely. While that offer was being considered, their experts were already mapping out the land. They perfected tactics like the feigned retreat where a small group pretends to run away, tricking the enemy into a massive, perfectly laid trap. And if a city said no, the response was total war. They'd wipe out the aristocracy to make sure there was no future resistance.
And their military was just a machine. You had these incredibly disciplined warriors who were maybe the best horsemen the world has ever seen. They had a sort of Pony Express system that let them communicate at lightning speed across huge distances. But here's the crucial part. They weren't just destroyers. They were sponges for talent and tech. They'd capture engineers to build them crazy siege weapons like mobile towers and catapults, and they'd recruit the best craftsmen from the peoples they conquered.
Okay, so you have this image of brutal, ruthless efficiency, right? But this is where the whole story just flips on its head. Everybody expected them to rule with the same brutal force they used to conquer, but the reality was something else entirely.
And that brings us to the heart of the paradox. This period of stability that came after the brutal conquests is now known as the Pax Mongolia, the Mongolian peace. For about 100 years, this huge chunk of the world, from China all the way to Europe, was united. It created an era of peace and connection like nobody had ever seen before.
And under this peace, the Mongols did some pretty incredible things. They built more bridges than any civilization before them. Get this, they made this Silk Road so secure, people used to say that a person could walk from one end of the empire to the other with a gold plate on their head and never be bothered. They were also surprisingly tolerant of different religions, and they even adopted a written alphabet to help on their massive, complex empire.
But you know how it goes. No empire lasts forever. After Genghis Khan died, his enormous kingdom was split up among his grandsons, and the single story of the Mongols starts to splinter into many. So the empire gets divided, and you end up with these three key successor states, or khanates. In Russia, you have Batu Khan and the Golden Horde, who sacked Kiev and ruled that area for centuries. In the Middle East, Hulagu Khan's Ilkhanate pushed into Persia, famously destroying Baghdad, a major center of learning. And then in the east, you have Kublai Khan, who conquered the rest of China and did something really different. He founded a Chinese-style dynasty, the Yuan, and even adopted a lot of their customs.
So what you're seeing is the single Mongol identity breaking apart. In Russia, they stayed as foreign rulers, just demanding tribute. In Persia, they eventually converted to Islam and blended in more. And in China, under Kublai Khan, they became rulers who really tried to integrate. That Mongol paradox we've been talking about was now playing out differently all over the map.
And eventually, even these powerful successor states started to fall. The Golden Horde was finally beaten by a rising coalition of Russian princes. The Ilkhanat's westward push was stopped cold in the Middle East. And in China, a massive rebellion, tired of being ruled by foreigners, kicked out the Yuan dynasty and started the Ming dynasty. The age of Mongol rule was drawing to a close.
But even as their physical empire crumbled, the world they created was forever changed. Let's take a look at the massive, long-term legacy they left behind.
First, just take a moment to appreciate the sheer scale of this thing. What you're looking at is the largest single connected land empire in the entire history of the world. By linking East and West so directly, they basically rewired the planet.
And this right here really sums up their entire story. It's the ultimate double-edged sword. Those safe trade routes that let spices and silk travel freely, they also, tragically, helped spread the bubonic plague. Their conquests brought unimaginable death and destruction, but those same connections sparked a revival in trade. They spread critical ideas like Arabic numerals, and they brought technologies like the cannon to Europe, which would literally change warfare forever. They were destroyers and creators, all at the same time.
So we come all the way back to where we began. There is no question. The Mongols remade the world. They created the connections that really laid the foundation for the globalized world we live in today. The final question, the one history leaves us to wrestle with, is a really tough one. Was it all worth the price?